Prize winner in literature. He was talking about the times when Garibaldi was trying to unite Italy into one. It was down in Sicily, where the landowners didn't quite understand what the game changer was taking place. And the statement which is useful in many cases is, if you want things to stay as they are, things will have to change. That's the only way you will keep it. Our business model needs to change. Thank you. Thank you.
So, thank you, John. I would say loud and clear. So, now, I mean, we change subject because, I mean, we went through a turbulent freight market earlier on in the morning. We went through a turbulent marine insurance market. And we are facing a very turbulent political situation across the globe. So the gentleman I'm introducing now is consulting to Studio Lauro and is defined as a health, safety, security, and environmental consultant. And of course, he is in charge whenever some very, very difficult situation occurs. His background is 30 years in the US Navy, and his last appointment was with the NATO Strike Force in the Special Operations Command. Let's hear with interest what he has to say in his speech. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We've had an enormous grand panel of experts here, and what I'm going to be talking about is something that's going to affect you as the CEOs of owners of shipping companies. Let me go to the first slide. Oops, we didn't. A little technical difficulty here. The subject is crisis management. I've been involved in the military for 33 years, retired once, recalled to active duty. I've been in command and have been command. I've been through many crises throughout the world, Africa, Middle East. Then I worked for Military Sealift Command for 4.5 years, which is here in Naples headquarters. And I was in charge of Anti-Terrorism Force Protection Director of Africa and Europe, a large area of responsibility. During the surge of the war, I had personally 278 vessels under my command at one time. And 95% of these vessels were short-term or long-term vessels, basically from your industry. Throughout my career, I've gone through a lot, and I've seen a lot. And I've seen the good and the bad of crisis management. Now, the first slide I'm showing you is President Bush. It's not because I'm a Republican or I voted for him. If you may recall, after he successfully apprehended Saddam Hussein, he landed on an aircraft carrier and stated that mission accomplished. Well, I was speaking out of term there. He did not listen to his advisors, did not foresee what was going to happen. Now we elect a new president. Same thing. He says the same thing. Years later, promising to withdraw the troops out of the Middle East, out of Iraq and Afghanistan, saying the same thing after capturing Osama bin Laden. Mission accomplished. Now we know what's going on today, the crisis over in Syria and Iran with ISIS. You would think these gentlemen would be surrounded with the best advisors and consultants that money can buy. But then again, you have to remember these are politicians, and politicians only want to hear what they want to hear. And sometimes when you have an advisor who's actually alone standing out there saying, no, this is incorrect, they are pushed aside. And Colin Powell, the general, who was a State Department Department of State director, he was pushed aside because he disagreed with the policies of George Bush, but he was proven right. Now, because of this, we have this crisis. This is the political side. We'll go on the environmental side of energy and everything else. We've been talking about offshore platforms. The Gulf of Mexico BP spill was addressed earlier today. Tony Hayward who was a British citizen working in the United States in charge of the BP facility out there, was all of a sudden thrown in front of the cameras. He's not skilled in speaking in public. So he said some incorrect things, such as the oil is just a small comparison in the vast largeness of the ocean, so it's nothing. But later on, the directors of BP stated, "We stand behind you 100%, which we found out was not true. The people in the Gulf of Mexico disliked this gentleman. They disliked BP. The political and environmental concerns after this are still there. The reputation of BP was destroyed in America. They sold off their stuff, or they're still selling off their stuff. And the liabilities in court will continue for many years to come, and the effect on the environment is going to be unknown." So these are 3 examples on where leadership and saying the right thing at the right time was wrong. So crisis management was their worst nightmare. A good Italian boy makes good in New York, right? The mayor of New York during the 9/11 attack, he came out and said, basically, go back home, stay off the streets, we don't know what's going on, et cetera, et cetera. But the key thing that he did was he projected command, calm, and control, even though he did not have any idea what was going on in the United States that day. By his presence and what he did, elevated him up even to a higher standard in politics in the United States. This was the excellent example on how to deal with the public. Not everyone is schooled in how to deal in crisis. Throughout my career, I've seen many good crisis command activities, and I've seen bad. The next one I'm going to show you is this picture. We've talked about offshore rigs. What is an offshore rig? Well, this is a jackup, and it's used for exploration in shallow waters off the coastline, depending on how far the seabed is. But normally, 300 meters, they jack up. The reason I'm showing on this picture is related to this article, which was in the Rig Zone, which is a energy website that I look at quite a bit. It says, Chevron CEO vows to use lessons learned after Angola LNG mishap. And this was on September 18th, just last month. The string of mishaps of a $10 billion Angola LNG gas venture hurt Chevron Corporation's reputation as a top-notch operator worldwide. He continues to say, John Watton continues to say that, well, Chevron will learn from the stumbles, mistakes of et cetera, such as electrical fires, the pipeline leaks, even the worker getting killed during the rig capsize that I just showed you the picture of. Vows to continue that this is the lessons learned, such as, the ultimate we are accountable for. U.S. CEOs and ship owners are the same. There's many lessons learned from this project, but there's not going to be finger pointing. Really, that's always happens. As you guys know, our lawyers here, that's why you're in courts all the time, because everyone's pointing fingers at each other. No one's taking accountability for what happened. What projected him to say this is because of the pressure of Wall Street. We're stating that you are behind, you have a lot of mistakes on this. You have to be held accountable for it. But what happened during this period is, I was on board that rig on the 1st of July, 2013, when it sunk and capsized. I know firsthand crisis management. And after retiring from the Navy, I thought I would never have to go through a crisis management event again in my life. But I was climbing up the helicopter deck. It was just tipping at a 45-degree angle wondering if I'm going to go home that. There was a lot of mistakes made by a lot of parties that night. A friend of mine was a helicopter pilot who spent 25 years in the Army. He services the offshore industry. He was the chief operating director for the helicopter company down in Angola. He went into the Crisis Command Center in Cabinda. And what he sat there and observed a lot. What he observed was people who are in senior management are not always the best people to be in charge of a crisis. He saw people in there panicking, incapable of making a decision, not accepting the flow of information coming in, not listening to what by the team around them is advising him to do. He thought the rig was just floating around like a cork. The command control is 2 locations, at the main base and actually where the event is occurring. At the location which I was on, we had 103 people on board, 1 person was killed, but out of the 102 on board, 67 of the people were injured in various capacities, as in broken bones, lacerations, injured backs, and the rest of them were walking around in shock. So you basically had maybe 10 people in charge of that because you had to control the situation in some manner. And we were bringing that information back to them. We had the 2 supplied vessels tied up to us. They were sending information back to them, but they were not grasping the reality of the crisis. Since this happened in Angola, down in Africa, host nation support was 0. And since you are in the maritime industry, you go all over the world. You don't have the comfort of the UK Coast Guard or Italian Coast Guard, the US Coast Guard, the Canadian Coast Guard, et cetera, to assist and aid you. You're out there by your own. So these were major problems that we went into that night. Some of the things important about the article that Mr. Watson stated. Several accidents, mishaps. I use the words accidents, even if I was not involved in there, even though he's using the political correct word of mishaps because, he was told to use that. The rig capsized first. Then they had a string of accidents since then. You would think a major sinking of an offshore platform would be enough to wake everyone up and say, hey, we have a serious problem down there. Did management have prior knowledge of this and did nothing? On the 17th of July, 2012, I sent an email saying the culture down here is a recipe for disaster. I don't know where it went to. It wasn't listened to. Was there a fear culture in the structure of reporting things wrong? Of course. All accidents are preventable. It's human error causes accident, the root cause of it, either by mechanically designed incorrectly or decision-making by people violating the safety rules and policies, grounding, cutting a short, going over a shoal. So, accidents are preventable. I had 43 years of total time in the sea. I know how to handle crisis. So I hope in the time that I've given you that you would digest what I've told you and take it back to your corporations and really rethink crisis management. I thank you.
Thank you, Shawn. Extremely interesting.